Hey there, crime enthusiasts. Welcome back to Behind the Scams, the podcast where we dive into the wild world of cons, capers, and criminal shenanigans. I'm your host, Sue, and boy, oh boy, do we have a doozy of a story for you today. Joining me is our resident scam buster and my husband, Nick. How's it going, Nick?
Oh man, Sue, it's going like a romance scammer's bank account. Suspiciously well. You would not believe the case we've got on our hands today. It's like someone took a Lifetime movie, sprinkled in some money laundering, and hit send. You know what I mean?
Ooh, color me intrigued. All right, Nick, spill the beans. What's the scoop on today's scandalous story?
Well, Sue, picture this. Florida woman, because of course it's Florida, gets caught up in a romance scam conspiracy. But here's the kicker. She's not the victim. She's the money launderer.
No way. Florida woman strikes again, huh? I swear, that state is like what do you call it? A petri dish for wild crimes. So, what's the deal with our love-struck laundromat lady?
All right, so get this. Her name's Christine Petit Frère. That's Petitfrere for those playing along at home. She's 30, from Miramar, Florida, and she just got slapped with a 30-month prison sentence. Why, you ask? Well, our girl Christine here was laundering millions, yes, millions, of dollars from romance scam victims.
Millions? Holy smokes. That's a lot of fake love letters, right? How does someone even get mixed up in something like that?
Well, Sue, it's all about the money, honey. Christine was basically the middleman, or middlewoman, I guess. She'd take the cash from the victims and funnel it to her overseas buddies. Of course, she kept a nice little chunk for herself, for all that hard work of clicking transfer on her banking app. In the world of scams, our girl Christine is called a money mule. These money mules are actually a vital cog in the wheel of scammers. More on that later in this podcast. From December 2019 to August 2023, Petit Frère funneled money from romance scams to a person in Ghana, whom the indictment called co-conspirator 1, in exchange for a commission. The indictment alleged that as yet unidentified scammers duped 3 elderly victims in their 60s to early 70s into sending money to Petit Frére's bank accounts, and in one instance, a cashier's check to her Miramar-based company, Glam Artistry. Prosecutors say the 3 victims lived in Arizona, Indiana, and Virginia, respectively. This story just goes to show how successful international romance scammers are at bilking people of their money. This fairly small case out of Florida managed to generate over $2 million in laundered funds. This is probably only the tip of the iceberg for this particular romance scamming operation. I am confident there are many more victims out there and much more dollar losses that the government was unable to find. The scale of these romance scamming operations should not be underestimated, and they will only continue to grow.
Wow, what a entrepreneur. But Nick, for our listeners who might be thinking, romance scams, that'll never happen to me. Can you break down how these scams actually work?
Well, for those of you out there saying this will never happen to me, let me just say there is a trail of romance scam victims out there who said the same thing. It can happen to anyone. So imagine you're scrolling through your dating app of choice, right? You match with this incredibly good-looking person. They're charming, they're attentive, they're perfect. Too perfect, actually. That's red flag number 1.
You mean they're sort of like my husband, Nick, right? Anyways, I see where this is going. So what happens next?
Yes, Sue, you're exactly right. They are a lot like your husband, Nick. Too perfect. Ha, ha, ha. Well, after that comedy interlude, let's get back to our story. So you start chatting, maybe even video calling, though the scammer always has an excuse why their camera isn't working. They build this intense emotional connection, make you feel special, And then, bam! Suddenly, they need money. Maybe it's for a plane ticket to come see you, or a medical emergency, or some investment opportunity that's too good to pass up.
That's so manipulative. It's like they're playing with people's hearts and wallets at the same time. But how does someone like Christine fit into all this? What did she do that landed her in jail by the feds?
Great question, Sue. See, once the victim sends the money, it needs to get to the scammers, right? But these guys are often overseas, and large international transfers can raise red flags. That's where our friend Christine comes in. As I mentioned previously, Christine has now taken on the role of the money mule. She receives the funds, keeps her cut, and then sends the rest on to the scammers using methods that are harder to trace.
Wow, it's like a whole criminal ecosystem. So how much did Christine actually launder? I mean, you said millions, but how many millions are we talking here?
Hold on to your hat, Sue. According to her plea agreement, oh yeah, she pleaded guilty, by the way, Christine personally laundered over $2.7 million of criminal proceeds. That's a lot of broken hearts and empty bank accounts, folks.
Holy guacamole, $2.7 million. That's like a whole lot of avocado toast. But seriously, Nick, that's an insane amount of money. How long was she doing this for?
You know, Sue, that's a great question. The court documents don't specify the exact time frame, but these kinds of operations can go on for months or even years before they're caught. What we do know is that Christine pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering in September 2024.
Now, Nick, you have some experience with money laundering crimes, right? Oops, I better clarify that. You spent 25 years as a special agent with the federal government. So you investigated money laundering crimes. You did not actually participate in money laundering. Either way, money laundering crimes are serious crimes and have stiff violations. Right, Nick?
No, I never actually committed money laundering, but I investigated a lot of financial crimes cases that involve money laundering and money laundering charges. And to answer your question, yes, money laundering is a serious crime with serious penalties. Money laundering is a federal crime that involves disguising the origins of illegally obtained money to make it appear legitimate. Money laundering typically includes transactions designed to conceal the source, ownership, or control of criminal proceeds, often linked to fraud, drug trafficking, organized crime, and even romance scammers. Convictions carry severe penalties, including up to 20 years in federal prison, fines up to $500,000 or twice the value of the laundered funds, and potential asset forfeiture. Additional penalties can apply under related statutes, such as conspiracy or RICO violations. Federal authorities, including the FBI, IRSCI, and Homeland Security, aggressively investigate and prosecute money laundering cases, particularly when linked to large-scale financial crimes.
So what you're saying, Nick, is that romance scammers and their co-conspirators can be held accountable for their crimes in the United States. So reporting any type of romance scam, or any scam for that matter, may actually make a difference and even put them in jail.
Precisely right, Sue. I don't know how many times I've heard, why should I bother reporting it if law enforcement is not going to do anything about it? As a former special agent who investigated financial crimes, I am telling you right now that your information does make a difference. So please report any scam immediately. Now, in this specific case, our money mule got slapped with a 30-month prison sentence. That's 2.5 years behind bars for those of you who don't want to do the math, but that's not all. The judge also ordered her to forfeit over $200,000 in proceeds that she personally received from the offense. She's gone from money mule to being a federal inmate for a few years. Additionally, she was most likely financially destroyed with the forfeitures and fines imposed by the government. In this case, crime did not pay.
Ouch! I bet that hurt. So she's got to give back the money in due time? Talk about a double whammy. But, what about the victims? Do they get their money back?
Unfortunately, Sue, in cases like these, full restitution is pretty rare. The money often gets spent or hidden away in offshore accounts. It's one of the reasons why romance scams are so devastating. Not only do victims lose their money, but they also have their trust shattered.
God, that's just awful. It really makes you think twice about online dating, doesn't it? I mean, not that I'm in the market or anything, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely, Sue. It's a growing problem, especially for older adults who might not be as savvy about online scams. In 2023, romance scams led to significant financial losses worldwide. In the United States alone, over 64,000 individuals reported falling victim to such scams, with total losses exceeding $1.1 billion. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, highlighted that these scams resulted in median losses of $2,000 per person, marking the highest reported losses among imposter scams.
Over $1 billion in losses? That's like a whole lot of, I don't even know what. Nick, this is seriously scary stuff. What can people do to protect themselves?
Great question, Sue. First and foremost, be skeptical of online-only relationships, especially if the person starts asking for money. Do a reverse image search of their profile picture. Scammers often use stolen photos, and never ever send money to someone you haven't met in person.
That's some solid advice, Nick. I hope our listeners are taking notes. Now, before we wrap up, I've got to ask, any word on Christine's co-conspirators? I mean, she couldn't have been working alone, right?
You're absolutely right, Sue. Christine was just one cog in a much larger machine. The Justice Department mentioned that she was working with overseas co-conspirators, but details on them are pretty scarce. These international scam rings can be tricky to bust, especially when they're operating from countries with, let's say, less cooperative law enforcement.
The old international jurisdiction problem. It's like playing whack-a-mole, but the moles are in different countries, and some of them have diplomatic immunity. What a mess.
That's a surprisingly accurate analogy, Sue. But despite the challenges, law enforcement agencies are getting better at tackling these kinds of crimes. The FBI's Miami field office, which investigated this case, has been particularly active in cracking down on romance scams and money laundering operations.
Well, that's something at least. Go get 'em, FBI. Now, Nick, before we sign off, any final thoughts on this wild tale of love, lies, and laundered loot?
Sue, cases like these really highlight how sophisticated and widespread these scams have become. It's not just some guy in a basement anymore. It's organized crime with a global reach. But there is a silver lining. Every conviction like Christine's helps disrupt these networks and sends a message that law enforcement is catching up. But I do want to quickly mention how someone like Christine can get caught up in a romance scammer operation. It's another scary method used by scammers. So Christine's role in this operation was referred to as Money Mule. A romance scammer money mule is someone who, knowingly or unknowingly, helps transfer or launder stolen money on behalf of fraudsters. Scammers often recruit these mules through emotional manipulation, convincing them that they are helping a romantic partner in need. In some cases, victims are completely unaware they are aiding in illegal activities, believing they are assisting their loved one with financial transactions, business deals, or emergencies. Others may willingly participate, lured by promises of financial rewards, unaware of the severe legal consequences. Since the money mule role can be lucrative, the money mule may overlook any potential criminal implications and carry out their dirty deeds for the scammers. Scammers instruct mules to open bank accounts, receive wire transfers, or move cryptocurrency, making it harder for law enforcement to trace stolen funds. Regardless of intent, being a money mule can result in serious criminal charges, including money laundering and fraud, leading to potential imprisonment, fines, and asset seizures, just like we saw in this case. Money mules communicate with overseas scammers, particularly in countries like Ghana, Nigeria, or throughout Asia, through a variety of channels that help criminals maintain anonymity and avoid detection. They use encrypted messaging apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, and Signal. Because of technology, it is much easier for scammers of all types to have a centralized location, such as Ghana or Nigeria, and have their co-conspirators work remotely in places like the UK or USA.
Very interesting, Nick. These scammers operate like any international business, offices in one country, and remote workers throughout the world. Really not much difference except their business destroys lives and is illegal.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Sue. And hey, if you're ever unsure about an online romance, just remember, real love doesn't ask for your credit card number.
Ha! Truer words were never spoken, Nick. Well, that's all we have time for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Scams. Please remember to like, subscribe, and don't send money to strangers on the internet. Until next time, this is Sue.
And this is Nick.
Signing off with our usual final thought. Stay safe, stay alert, and stay scam-free. Bye for now.